You're listening to Don Carpenter on News Talk 1270 KIML.
News Talk 1270 KIML, Don Carpenter Show. And I do believe, okay, we got a couple lines blinking here, so hopefully one of them is Cindy Hill. We'll try this one first. News Talk 1270, you're on the air. Is this Cindy?
It is, Dawn. Good morning.
Good morning, and I have to apologize if I hung up on you by accident during the break. I was actually just trying to get the line set up so you could call in, and because we had a bunch of calls during the last segment. So
not worry, Don.
Yeah.
I called back. I know the number. No problem.
Okay, thanks a lot, and thanks for calling and taking a few minutes to join us this morning, and thanks for waiting too. So
sure.
It's good to hear from you. I haven't heard from you in a while. Why don't you give us a little bit of an update on what's going on right now with the latest with the whole dispute with the legislature?
Well, I'll just give you an example of what we did on Saturday. That'll kind of give you a sense of our days, because our days are long, and some of them have to do with the work, and some have to do with the extra bureaucratic responsibilities that the legislature is directing our way right now. Let me give you a sense. We drove early in the morning to Devil's Tower. One of the staff members and I did Teacher of the Year interviews along the way. We did 3 of those, one for an encampment teacher. We stopped in Douglas, another teacher along the way. And then once we got to Devil's Tower, we looked at property for a proposed property exchange. As you know, I sit on SLIB, the State Land and Investment Board, and there's a property exchange being proposed for the Mosque property up in Cook County, and then also some really prime property right up next to state trust land property next to Devil's Tower. And so we looked at the comparability of those two and drove all over those pieces in my husband and my Suburban. And then we drove home that night. So we had about an 18-hour day. Working on Sunday, we were working on a subpoena request that was submitted to us on Thursday for many, many documents back to August 17th of 2010. And you might think, why August 17th, 2010? I submitted a document request to the governor's office for Mary Cahill's emails back to August 17th, 2010. She was working in state government at the time, and I've seen very few of those total emails, and I asked for a few others, I think 4 or 5 other people's emails, and that was months ago, and I've seen very few emails. So they have turned that around, and they're asking us for a significant amount of documents and emails, and we have that work ahead of us. We only have a few days to accomplish that, I think maybe 15 or 16 days to accomplish that. And so that's what we're working on. We're working on it on Sunday. We've been working on it tirelessly since they gave it to us. Besides that, we are working with these investigative committees that the Speaker of the House has gathered together, and they've asked us for documents. So we've been responding with thousands and thousands of documents. My very small team has been, again, working tirelessly to submit documents for these requests. Now, remember, Thursday was a subpoena. That means if I would not be able to get it done in those few days, that I would be in contempt of court. Now, I don't have subpoena power, so when I asked the governor for the documents back in July, and remember, there's someone in the northern part of the state who asked for some of these documents in January and was unable to get anything, and then asked the congressional delegation and the 4 electeds to help him. And so in July, I asked for these. I will tell you that they haven't produced, and I can't do anything about it. I've had to hire an attorney, and we've had lots of correspondence going back and forth. If you ever want to see those letters, you'll see roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And so we still are waiting. However, they have, again, subpoena power, so they can make us do it in just a few days, and we're going to. And we'll show everyone that you can do it, and then I will ask the governor why, again, he will not submit his.
Now, do you think these subpoena requests, do you think they're Are they actually being done to get information, or do you think they're being done as a punishment? I mean, do you have any idea why you were getting these requests with such a short time span?
I don't know. I can't speculate on what their reasons are. I'll tell you, I wasn't in office August 17th of 2010. So, I was sworn in on January 3rd of 2011. So it seems odd that they would take my request for Mary Kay Hill's emails, which again, August 17th was when I requested that hers began. Why would they ask for mine and do just something very similar? I don't know. I do know that when I requested hers, we've had 18 pages of lists of privileges that they've claimed for Mary Kay Hill's emails, which is really unusual when you claim a legislative privilege for someone who's not a legislator and who doesn't work for the legislature. So there's some really questionable things. I'm glad to see that, we're going to continue and do our part. My staff are willing to do everything they possibly can. They're good spirits, and we'll do it. We'll show them that you can, even though we have very few resources. And again, the governor has access to 70-plus attorneys in the Attorney General's office, plus all of his staff, plus the legislature has LSO and all of their staff. And I'm thinking, and they can't produce these. I hate to speculate, but I do question, why not?
Now, you mentioned you had to hire an attorney. I mean, is that coming out of your pocket?
Absolutely. All of the costs have come out of my pocket. For the Supreme Court challenge, when the governor signed SF 104 and I served him with the Supreme Court lawsuit, that came out of our pocket. We prepared all of that. There are people in the state, throughout the state, and anyone who's listening and has contributed, thank you so much. And anyone who's still willing to contribute, if you would contact me at 286-0479, that's 286-0479, I'd appreciate it, because this is the people's voice and vote that we're talking about. The people can be very proud of the briefs that we put forth. We were very, very, very proud of the work that was done, and the oral arguments on August 20th were well done, and we are optimistic about the outcome. We thought that the justices asked very thoughtful questions. You could tell they've done their homework, and we're optimistic about it. So yes, it's all coming out of pocket, and that's unfortunate, because everything that they're doing on the other side, the people are paying for. This was all created by them, and all of the legal remedies are being, again, put on the people's back through our dollars, and I don't think they should actually use that way. I think this is all very unfortunate. It doesn't have anything to do with children. It's been a distraction, and I'm just so disappointed in just a handful of people in Wyoming who have a lot of power and control in this state. And my understanding is it's been going on for a very long time. The intimidation and the bullying that I've experienced and noted and just witnessed, I've been shocked by. We talk about it being in schools, but it's in adult behavior in some places that you would be surprised by. And I'll tell you that we're going to continue to stand firm and strong, and I appreciate all those who've been out again supporting us, and thank you for your prayers. If you've been praying for us, I want you to know I'm grateful, and we're going to continue to go forward. I let some senators know I'm going the distance. And so, and as you know, I've been through audit after audit and investigation after investigation since I've walked through the door. Since I was elected, I defeated a senator in the general, and there were some folks who were pretty upset, I know. They started talking in the governor's leadership meetings, Hank Coe, how we're going to make this an appointed position right out of the chute. He did it almost every meeting is what was reported to me, until they started, getting it together as to what the plan would look like. Right after my very first year, they tried to make this an appointed position. It didn't go through the legislature. And then, SF 104 right after my second year. And that was after the scores were up and all subject matters tested, all grade levels tested, 2 years in a row. After the governor signed SF 104, he flew out to Washington, D.C. He came back. He told the Department of Education that they're going to apply for the No Child Left Behind waiver.
Oh, hang on a second here. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that.
Sure. Yeah.
The phones are always a problem for me here.
I wish we could have callers. That would be great.
Yeah. Actually, I was just about to put the number out. If you want to call and ask Superintendent Hill any questions, 682-1270, 682-1270 is the number. Please feel free to call. And I know there's people out there with questions and comments because I get them all the time when you're not on the show.
Oh, and you know what? I get so that I want everyone to know everything, and so I only have a few minutes, so I just try to get as much out as possible. But I'm sorry if I spoke too much in short of time.
No, never. I mean, you never speak too much. It's this talk show. You can talk all you want. Trust me.
Oh, good. Well, you know, one of the things that the senator, our good Senator Enzi, shared with me in July. When I first came into office, I read everything, and I realized that the waiver was something that the No Child Left Behind waiver was going to require us to do more than even No Child Left Behind had required us. And so I called him and I said, this doesn't look good, you know, more requirements? And he said, Cindy, you're right. And so he said, you know, the president doesn't have the authority to offer waivers with more requirements. He can offer waivers, but not with more federal requirements. So for 2 years, even though pressured, I did not submit or apply for that waiver. Once SF 104 was signed, the governor immediately applied for that waiver through the Department of Education. In July, Senator Enzi said, I think, you know, you should share that with others. Go ahead, share that with others, what you and I had discussed. And shortly after I was on radio sharing that around the state, the governor backed off and put that waiver on hold. And I'm sorry that it's on hold. I wish he'd just say, no, we don't need more federal requirements. That we have enough that we're having to work with the feds on right now. Why would we relinquish more control to the federal government in education when our budget is less than 7%? 6% of our budget in education is federal. And I say, why would we give 100% control over to the federal government? Why would we commit to more requirements? So that was perplexing to me. It was the first time I really realized what the governor thought about education, because we really hadn't had a conversation, even though I'd requested them, about education in Wyoming. I see that we are very different in our belief system. So when he took, you know, the education responsibilities on himself midterm, not being voted into that position, but self-appointing himself as the education leader of Wyoming, I quickly began paying attention to what he was believing in and what his vision was, and I'm very different. He has said on radio that education is controlled by the legislature, and I disagree. I think local control is where the best decisions are made closest to the solutions, and I don't think the legislature should be micromanaging education. I know that they do funding-wise, and I understand that, and certainly they've done a nice job with fully funding our schools, but I don't think they should be micromanaging our education system.
Now you mentioned standards, and that brings up, I guess, the next obvious question. What's the latest on the Common Core standards?
Well, as you know, the State Board of Education approved them in 2012. I voted no. I thought we didn't have a process that I felt comfortable with. I didn't feel like there had been enough weighing in on these, and very uncomfortable with what had taken place from start to finish here. And so I voted no. And yet the Common Core are being implemented and began that implementation in 2012 because when the governor signed that, those rules that would, they take the effect and force of law. And so they are being implemented all over the state. There was a resolution by the National Republican Party and also by our state Republican Party that opposed that Common Core decision. And so that's been, as you know, in the media quite a bit in the last month. And I think that discussion is continuing. So I think there's a lot more to learn here. I wish I had more time on the radio, and I'd like to talk about this more openly so that people could understand the positions, the education position, if you're a teacher, how you see it, and if you're a parent, how you might see it, if you're in the legislature. Certainly the legislative leadership is pushing the adoption of the Common Core. Matt Teeters, Hank Coe felt strongly that we should adopt them. Their committee submitted a letter, memo to the State Board of Education urging it. The governor urged the adoption of the Common Core. He sat before the board and asked us to adopt them. So there are competing viewpoints here, and it really, if anyone's interested in having a dialogue, again, my number is 286-0479. I'd be happy to come up to the area and give a history of how this the process occurred, and talk about it.
Yeah, maybe, I know you don't have a whole lot of time today, but maybe we can set aside a time where you can just come on the show and tell us a little bit more about the Common Core standards and what they mean and everything. We'll completely not talk about any of the controversy, that's going on with some of the other stuff, but we'll just talk about Common Core sometime. So, maybe we can set something up like that.
That's great. I would really appreciate that. And regarding the other controversy, after the governor signed SF 104 and I served him with the lawsuit, he and I sat down in his office and we talked. And at one moment he asked me if, he said, "So are you going to run for Senate?" And I looked at him and I said, "I hadn't even thought about it. I hadn't even considered it." And then I looked at him after all of what we just discussed, and I said, "No, Governor, I'm going to run for governor." And shortly thereafter, the oligarchy, that very powerful group, appropriated $150,000 for the McPherson report. And that investigation is different than all the rest. That one is political. The audits always had, you have to follow the law, you have to have facts, you have to have evidence. And in this one, when you're looking at a political audit, or in this case, a political investigation, it's not based on facts, which were surprising to me. And impeachment doesn't require facts either, which was surprising to me. I'm learning a lot about how things work politically. I'm an educator. I've been focused on growing kids. We did a really good job those 2 years I was in office working in the department. But right now I'm realizing why people don't step up to this group of people who have been in control for a long time. One lawyer said to me recently, he said, "Do you know why, Cindy? Because people don't want to happen to them what's happening to you. But I want you to know I think it's important that people do step up to them." There's a lot of corruption going on in our state government that I have noted and will continue to note. The media, the Casper Star, won't cover it. From my perspective, they are the public relations arm for the governor's office and continue to ignore those things that I think the people should know about. So if I'm in a gubernatorial race, I promise the people that you will know what I have learned and witnessed in these 2 years in office, and I promise that I will leave no information underneath the rug. We'll have it all out in the open.
So, how are the preparations for that coming along then, for the gubernatorial race?
Well, we've been very busy. So we've been focusing on the duties that they've required of us through SF 104, which are mostly bureaucratic bureaucratic duties. Don't have a lot to do with kids, and then we've had all of these records requests and requirements for these investigative subcommittees, and I'm just doing the best that I can under the circumstances, and I will tell you that in the end we think that we will prevail. We think that the people of Wyoming are a lot smarter than the governor's attorney said in the injunction hearing when he said 80% of the people don't even remember who they voted for. I've always believed and still do that the people not only know who they voted for, but they're paying attention. They read between the lines. In the papers, I've been maligned. It's been, she may have misappropriated, she may have done this, or she's being accused of doing this, but I have not misappropriated. And trust me, if there's been something that I could have been prosecuted for, you would have read about it in the Casper Star starting 2 years ago, because the attacks have been on. So I look at my team, and I say to them, we'll be the most vetted team in this gubernatorial race, and maybe any gubernatorial race ever. And the people will know who they have running, and they'll be able to trust us. They deserve to be able to trust someone and a team to do the right thing when no one's looking. And that's what's needed.
Yeah, so I think we might have a call here. I don't know if they're still on hold, but we'll give it a shot. News Talk 1270, you're on the air with Cindy Hill.
Hi, Cindy. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I guess I'm one of them 80% that know who I voted for, or the 20%.
I think in Wyoming that number's probably flipped, to tell you the truth. I mean, everybody that I talk to around here seems to know a lot more about politics than they might get credit for.
It's like when you had that Mr. Lovedown on a while back, he used those exact words you said, Cindy. They may have done this, or we're going to do this. And he just kept talking about, iffy words, but he had the negative words in there to make people try to think negative.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we didn't let him get by with that. But what I'd like to know is he's had all these investigations on you, which cost the taxpayers, I'd say, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then they come up with nothing.
And you know what? I smile. He stood before the Central Committee and told them that I would have due process. 32 of them still didn't believe him after he said, he wrote an anonymous letter that slandered me. Of course, he didn't want it to come from his lips, even though he read it aloud. And 33 of them believed him or agreed with him. And then just days later, they did not give me due process. And he thinks that people won't pay attention to that, and people that are not, we're all busy with our lives, but the people of Wyoming are not foolish. They're very smart, Mr. Lovedown. And our state system is not working for the people. It's working for a handful of people in, I would say, I call it an oligarchy in the legislature, who I think are profiting by a very wealthy state. And I will lay out those important, I would say, critical issues that are taking place in our legislature and in our government as I'm in that race. I hope I get to be in that gubernatorial race. You're going to hear more, and I can hardly wait. We need a person of integrity running, and I will do that. I promise that I will continue to keep my promises to the people. And thank you for your support. It matters to me.
I'd also like to see, since he's been wasting all this money, isn't that kind of like abuse of his power? And can't we hold him accountable for all that money he's wasted?
Well, if you have a governor who has access to 70 attorneys in the Attorney General's office and DCI, criminal investigators, I promise you that the things that have been going on will be investigated. Right now, as a superintendent, I don't have access to those things. But as the governor, I would. And there are many things in the state and there are people listening who are probably looking at their spouse or someone they know right now, and they're starting to talk about the things they know that have been going on in our state. I want you to know it will be an open door policy, and we're going to start investigating. But I can't do that right now. Again, my focus as a superintendent is on the students. When I get to do that again, I'll look forward to it. Right now, I'm having to do these document requests. But as the governor, there are the resources there, and I promise you we'll have a conversation again.
I can't wait to vote you in as governor then.
Thank you, and I appreciate your support. Someone said to me recently, do you ever feel alone? And I said, not in Wyoming. Not in Wyoming. I feel like there's so many who understand and are appreciative of the work and the strength to stand up against these guys, because I know why so many have folded. And for those of you who are listening who've been in bad situations and have had to acquiesce to these fellows, I get it. I know why you've had to. And so know that we can stand together and we'll do this together. Wyoming, if we can't do it in Wyoming, we can't do it anywhere. This is going on in Washington, D.C. It's going on all over the United States. A fellow in Evanston asked me, he said, Cindy, do you really think we can clean up what's going on? And I said, if you don't care, if you have a governor who doesn't care about what the Casper Star says or what the Tribune Eagle or anybody says about them, they just do the right thing no matter what. They don't care what someone does or says to them. You can do it. But if you care about any of those other things, you'll acquiesce. And so I want you to know I'm willing to do it. And I know I have the support and strength of those behind me throughout the state. Thank you.
And I think that would be a good note to end on. I know you're quite busy today, so how about this? We'll set up a time. Maybe you can come on and tell us a little bit more about the Common Core stuff, and maybe we can actually talk a little bit more about some of the other things that you're doing. I know everybody likes to talk about the controversy, and we definitely give that enough time. But I'd like to learn a little bit more about some of the other duties you have, and. So how about this? I'll get a hold of you, and maybe we could set something up for sometime in the next couple weeks.
I'd love to have it where we could have an hour or two where people could come and we could actually have a real discourse back and forth so people can ask me questions in person. So if there's a chance that I can come and be there in person so everyone can ask their questions, I think that's really critical so that no one is confused or has anything that is not answered. Anyway, thank you for your time, Don. It's always good to speak with you. And for the listeners, again, thank you for your support. And I appreciate the work you're doing every day. And trust me, I'm trying to do all the things that I promised I would do when you voted me in.
Well, thank you, Superintendent. And I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk to you again soon. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Don. You too.
Yep. Thanks a lot. There you go. State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Cindy Hill, and I'll try to get something set up. Maybe we'll do some kind of round table where we'll have maybe a couple listeners come in, and we'll take calls and that kind of stuff. That would actually, that's not a bad idea. I wish I'd thought of it myself. So let's take our break, and we'll come back, and maybe we'll talk about some other things that are going on. News Talk 1270 KIML.
Not insulting guests since 2013. Don Carpenter on News Talk 1270 KIML.